of how to stay in control. Thank you, Jakob Berman of Operation Survival, for facilitating this very necessary event. Over the last few years, we've had and seen a major uptick in behavioral health issues among children and young adults in our neighborhood and across the board. It is really important for you to be aware of and recognize when your child is struggling. You need to know where to turn to and how to help your child. As Yidden, the first place we turn to for guidance and direction is the Torah. The Alter Rebbe in Tani quotes from the Zohar that Torah is a derivative of the word Hira, which means lessons that we must apply in our daily lives. Shlomo HaMelech tells us that we have to educate each child according to his way. We must know and recognize that each child is a world, and our duty as parents and educators is to tune into our child's world and do the best to cultivate the greatness that they possess and bring it to fruition. The Rebbe Rashab stated that just like it's a mitzvah to put on tefillin every day, we must also think about chinuch every day. And we have to be in tune with the world at large and our children's world in particular, to be able to protect them from the unwanted influences and dangers out there, and at the same time nurture them to grow in a very healthy manner. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Shlomo Zimmerman, a licensed clinical psychologist who I have consulted with many times over the last few years. During the lecture, you can submit questions through the Q&A tab or through the comments, and after the lecture, we will address them.
Okay, is that my cue?
That's your cue.
Okay, so thank you very much, Menachem. Thank you so much to Rabbi Jakob Berman, Operation Survival, and CUL Live for putting this together. And most importantly, I think thank you to all of you. Anyone who's willing to come out on the topic of parenting is already a great person trying to do the right thing, but anyone who's willing to come out something that still has COVID in the title, I give you immense credit. Nobody, including myself, I think wants to hear any more about this, but we're forced to face the challenges head on, and that's what we're going to try to do here. So right after COVID initially hit, unfortunately hitting the Crown Heights community very powerfully, very early. We have, I think I was told about almost 80 Nistarim from that community. That Pesach, right before Pesach, I and some of my colleagues, we were manning this anonymous hotline, mental health professionals dealing with COVID. And things were relatively quiet. And I tried to take everybody off the line, except myself and a colleague, for Pesach, the 3-day Yontif. And we literally did not know what hit us. Just over those days alone, we got hundreds of calls. We actually had to get people on Yontif to start manning the phones because we literally could not deal with the influx. With a lot of help and about 100 different therapists from all over coming together, ba'achdus, to man those lines, we fielded about 2,800 calls. And before Rosh Hashanah, we closed it up feeling like we had sort of addressed the COVID issue. And I was really hoping, we were seeing a tremendous lull, both in terms of globally, in terms of what was coming to my practice. And I thought, okay, we sort of bit the bullet. And we avoided the main thing. We dealt with the front end problems, and now things have been, settled down. Unfortunately, the last couple of months, I'm seeing all of a sudden a resurgence in calls to my practice. They really range. I have parents saying to me, hey, Dr. Zimmerman, my kid was one of the top kids in his yeshiva. I don't recognize him anymore. He's in bed. He complains of headaches, lethargy. He's sleeping most of the time. He's really not himself. The doctor's not sure what's going on with him. I've had people call me that their kid was totally well pre-COVID, needs an appointment because they became psychotic and are hospitalized and are trying to find a discharge plan from them. And recently, we've also been getting calls from COVID Yisomim who are not getting back to themselves. And so we're really, again, starting to see lingering effects across the spectrum. Some exacerbating sort of regular conditions we often see, and some really bringing powerful new issues to the foreground. I was asked to make this very practical, and I will try to do so. So it might get a little bit more sort of very pragmatic throughout. So bear with me with that. I won't spend that much time talking about COVID. I'll just use it as a springboard. So again, those of you who had enough, hopefully it should be all right in managing. Because in terms of COVID itself, so COVID attacks things in many different ways that we're still really sorting out. We see direct neurological effects. So once we knew that people were losing their sense of smell and taste, we knew that this was hitting their neurological system, and that was going to have massive effects for mental health as well. There's also a strong link between the intense immune response and how the body deals with things, as well as mental health issues. And inflammation has also been linked to significant mental health stressors. So you have those three sort of direct results of the virus and the body's response. And then you have all the stressors of the whole world going upside down. Now, thankfully, the acute COVID cases are largely behind us, but we have what's called this long COVID. And it's really a phenomenon that we're first trying to figure out now. And by the time the research gets done, it's getting old and new things are coming, and we're just jumping on this. Whatever data we can get, we see a tremendous number of people who are just not back to themselves. Some are tired, lethargic, they have headaches, there's sleep issues, aches and pains, anxiety, depression, different symptoms. People are having stomach issues exacerbated, all sorts of medical issues, both in the young and old. Even the pediatrician offices are seeing spikes in things that usually they see much later or don't come on in this manner, and COVID seems to be triggering a lot. So there's still a lot we're coping with in terms of COVID. And just as some of the latest data come out, it's basically demonstrated that you have about a 34% increased chance of getting diagnosed with a neurological or mental health disorder within 6 months of contracting COVID-19. And again, we're still figuring out what's happening with the long haul COVID. But the biggest factor, particularly for the mental health issues, is the world upheaval, especially when it hits those who are during critical developmental periods and for vulnerable populations. That being said, before we sort of dive into the issues, the mental health issues, I think it's crucial to always remember that resilience is still a norm. Kids have a tendency to bounce back. Many did really fine throughout COVID. And it was interesting, I spoke about this earlier in the year to a lot of different school programs. Some did even better, especially with schools not in person. And they had more liberties, more freedom. The structure was different. And that was something that we really need to also figure out, why do some of those kids really fare better not in schools? But there is an element that for many, their families got closer, spending more quality time together, more interactions. Before we started, there were a couple questions about that, and that's critical. And strikingly, about 68% of teens in the survey said that their families had become closer during the pandemic. What was really remarkable was only 15% who said that their families had come closer were depressed, compared to 27% of those who didn't believe their families had become closer. So there's a significant difference, just that feeling of closeness of the family. Also, I think is remarkable, 53%, so a small majority of teens said that the experience made them feel stronger and more resilient. And so I think especially, we're mental health professionals, we end up dealing in the difficult challenges and the clinical issues, but it's really, really helpful to have a balance and to see that so many kids do well and kids can certainly bounce back. At one point, the title of this talk was involving trauma. I'm just going to talk about that briefly. So some people refer to these as sort of big T's and little T's. So big traumas and little traumas. Some people have a very hard time with that idea of little traumas because they really have big effects. But the way sort of clinically, diagnostically, to sort of count for, let's say, a PTSD diagnosis or something like that, is you have to have exposure to an actual or threatened death, a serious injury, or sexual violence. So most people didn't have that, although some obviously had people very close to them extraordinarily ill or who died. And obviously there was an increase in abuse with people living in abusive situations. So there definitely were some who had that. But the what's referred to sometimes as ambiguous loss. It usually happens for immigrants, where everything familiar, predictable, and provides a structure and normalcy is thrown off. Nothing nothing that's stable and consistent is still there. And that's what happens to the entire world. And so adults, we have a little bit of an easier time. We have our bearings. For kids, that can be extremely difficult. And so that certainly is almost every child going through this experienced at least one or a number of these little T's and these struggles. And obviously, tragically, we finally thought we're coming out of this and COVID, and we're going to celebrate Lag BaOmer, and now we're faced with this enormous neurone tragedy. So you're returning to a sense of stability, safety, structure, normalcy. We're just not there yet. And so it's a very challenging time for children and adults alike, and we need to bear that in mind. The kids just don't feel emotionally, psychologically safe or stable. And Baruch Hashem, most of the kids are going around looking okay, doing things they used to do, but underneath, there's still a current of anxiety, tension, stress that we need to be looking out for. Perhaps one of the largest studies ever done on the impact of these kinds of difficulties on kids is called the ACE study, ACE, for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's a massive study done over many years. The upshot of it all is that when you have more adverse childhood experiences, with every increased number of those adverse experiences, you have much greater risk for both physical health issues, heart attacks and strokes and everything like that, to serious mental health problems, from anxiety to all sorts of very substantive psychosis, suicidality, all those things. And it's very clearly linked. So kids going through a lot of these adverse experiences really affects them. And obviously for those kids who are facing parnasa issues, where the family no longer had jobs, people losing, the shalom bias was going down, there's food insecurity, anything like that obviously would exacerbate this. And we see the data on that very clearly, that those kids who really got walloped were from, again, sadly, how it usually works is already from very vulnerable situations. So that's sort of the COVID piece in a nutshell. But if we're going to be honest, and Rabbi Berman and Menachem talked about, this has been going on for years. And the truth of the matter is that mental health in general, and amongst children and adolescents pre-pandemic, was just flatly bad. It's sometimes shocking to think about this, but the rates of anxiety and depression in children and adolescents in the US was far lower during the Great Depression, World War II, the Cold War, and the turbulence of the 60s and 70s than they are today. So we're really just seeing these rates climbing and climbing. This was pre-COVID. And again, pre-COVID, we were seeing 1 in 5 children and teens have a diagnosable psychiatric disorder at any given time. And a staggering statistic is that if you look at a kid from 13 to 18 and a half years old, the likelihood is 49.5% of adolescents will experience a mental illness at some point. So we have 1 in 5 who at any given moment have this. But if you look at those years, at some point the kids go in and out of meeting criteria, 49.5% of them will experience this. And when you talk to the kids and you survey kids about what's going on and how they manage, 67% feel pressure to keep things to themselves, not talk about feelings, and to pretend to feel better, to not worry anybody. And 65% say they try to deal with their feelings on their own. So there's a whole lot of kids really struggling and really trying to cope with something that's really hard even for adults to cope with all by themselves. And that's something that I think we're really trying to set out to really put a stop to as much as we can humanly do to get kids to not struggle alone. And the same goes for adults. So the issue is, before we even deal with the kids, parents are also really struggling. And again, mental health in the US has not been good pre-COVID, and it's worse now. And across the board, mental health issues, postpartum depressions, anxieties have all increased amongst the adults. And we know that that always filters down to the kids. So we're living in a very anxious and tenuous world. And it's something to be aware of, something to try to deal with, something as much as possible to try to reduce the anxieties, the tension, the fear. As Menachem pointed out, the first step, we go to the Torah. There's not much research on this for COVID, but the study that came out of Israel found that emunah, faith, helps. In Israel, the highest rates of anxiety were found from COVID were found in the secular sector, that at 21%. And the lowest were among the ultra-Orthodox at 7%. So a significant difference for those. And the researchers talk about this sense of faith, this sense of direction, the sense that Hashem's taking care of us. It's not just random. The world doesn't just spit out a virus and now it's gloom and doom. That, Hashem is doing this and giving us, but he loves us, he cares for us. That deep sense of emunah is helpful. But obviously for many, it's still not enough to take away their struggles, their mental illness, etc. And we need to deal with that on a psychological level. Just as an aside, even regarding weight gain, so there was a study done between stress and gaining weight through this. And so stress is somewhat related in the study to weight gain, what was called moderated by intrinsic religiosity. So those who have a deep internal value for religion feel like it provides an overall framework and primary motivation in life, they actually did better and gained less weight, even if they had the same amount of stress. So that might give you some permission to enjoy the cheesecake at least, and hopefully it will help you going forward. The thing that I would highlight, probably beside, for nothing to do with COVID, aside for this undercurrent of anxiety, the number one thing I've seen for years, and this is across both in the secular world and in the frum world, and I speak Yiddish. I have offices in Brooklyn and Queens, from Chabad to Satmar, Syrian to Litvish. It's across the board. There is a huge magefa of what modern psychological research calls pathological shame. This sort of deep-seated feeling, I'm not good enough. Something is wrong with me. I'm innately flawed. I'm unworthy. And that connects, I'm unworthy of real connection. I don't deserve it. And that follows with a sort of thought and belief system of if people knew the real me, they'd want nothing to do with me. And that makes that really opening up and connecting to people is so difficult. Being vulnerable with them is incredibly dangerous for me, because I think if they really know me, they really see me, they'll reject me. And so I don't really share myself, and I don't get those benefits of human connection, which is one of the most important things for healthy life. Going back to what Menachem said in terms of starting with the Torah, the first loy toiv, the template for what is not good, is hayosa adam levada, being alone, being disconnected, being in your own space, not being able to share your real self and feel an empathic, close connection. And that is something that we really need to collectively work on, reducing that pathological shame and really building that healthy core of both our children and ourselves. And sort of related to that, there's a tremendous amount of intense perfectionism. People not feeling good enough on one side, they're constantly shooting for these high goals. And I see it a tremendous amount in the frum world, and especially we try to be the top learner or the top chassid, and it's just really feeling never doing enough. And then there's on the flip side just a sense of emptiness, meaninglessness, just floating around. That's becoming more and more common. And something that I've been seeing only in the last couple of years that I really rarely saw before is just teens with no aspirations whatsoever. It used to be there were a lot of intense teens, and we still have plenty of those. But now I'm also seeing that just, what do you want to do? I don't care. It wasn't just learning. People were, okay, I want to be a doctor. I want to make money. I want to do this. And now it's just like, I'm just going to sit and watch YouTube the whole day. They have just nothing in there. There's some emptiness that's, even as a mental health professional, it's deeply disturbing, and it's very hard to deal with because they don't have much motivation to change. And what we see globally, just the ways in which we're distracting, from our smart devices and Netflix and numbing out, and the way we're trying to live up to the illusions portrayed all around us, and even just dwelling within those illusions, how captivating they are, it's unprecedented. The digital screens, devices, the social media. We have fake people, fake perfection, fake relationships, and fake solutions. And so our kids are constantly being bombarded by this fake world that they're trying to live up to, make sense of, and be productive in. And they can't really appreciate that it's all a mirage. And so many of them are walking away not feeling good enough inside. They can't measure up to what they're seeing. And we're distracting like never before. We're distracting with media. Pornography is unbelievably rampant. Even in the fromest world, even in the Hasidishim, like the Lifishim, it does not matter. Drugs are all over the place. Self-harm, you had special lectures on that. And suicidality are now options in ways they never were before, particularly for our communities. And so that's what we're really trying to target and deal with. But again, to go back to what I said earlier, we don't want to come at this from a traumatized, loss-based perspective. Oh my gosh, everything is terrible. Like we talked about, kids are resilient, can lead healthy, happy, and productive lives. We just need to help them, and we need to step up and do what we have to do. So let's talk a little bit about parents. Again, parents love and care for their children more than anyone else in the world. And one takeaway message here is you got to trust your parental intuition. That sense something's up with my kid. Nobody knows your kid better, and nobody has that innate intuition. So you got to go with that. And that should be sort of number one telltale sign of how do I know when my kid needs help? I have that feeling. Now, there are some cautions about that. We have to know our blind spots. Some of the things we struggle with as parents, we're often stressed. We're often struggling with our own internal toxic shame, and we're often feeling disconnected ourselves. And the pandemic has only worsened our mental health. So a lot of times we're just not in the space to deal with things, or I almost subconsciously, I can't deal with maybe my child is hurting, or the guilt or the shame that comes up. Maybe I failed my child, and all those thoughts, how naturally we go there, especially as Jews. So that shame, the idea that this reflects on me as a parent really cripples us from being able to face our kids' difficulties in healthy ways. So we sometimes have fear, we deny, repress the severity of the illness, or we sweep it under the rug, or we struggle from, NMK syndrome, not my kid. It's normal, it's not a big deal. I don't know, we'll get a good shidduch, everything will be okay. And that's one big blind spot we really struggle with. But it's imperative that we know that guilt and shame are not good motivators for parenting. They're not really good, healthy motivators for anything. When I feel badly about myself as a person or as a parent, it might feel like, oh, wow, now I'm going to go do better. I'm going to go help my kid. But the truth is, you're just beating yourself up. You're modeling for your kid also unworthiness and shame, and it just tends to spread. We end up modeling it and spreading it. So when we're disappointed and hard on ourselves, and we do that to others too. So really the goal here is a lot of self-compassion for parents and trying to put away all that negative chatter in our own brains and face the task of what can I do to help my kid. That being said, the strongest predictors of depression, anxiety in teenagers are children's perceptions that their parents are dissatisfied with them. Like if parents always pointing out in the ways that they're not doing enough, the way they could improve, and along with poor parent mood. Those are the two biggest predictors. So without coming from a shame and guilt place, the ability to be more comfortable with ourselves, transmit to our kids that we're more accepting of them, and cope with our own challenges is some of the best things we can possibly do for our children. Some parents, the other blind spot is the other extreme. Instead of repressing and shoving it under the rug, they're just so anxious and struggling to cope. It leads to freaking out. Oh my gosh, my kid has a struggle. They get overwhelmed. It's the biggest deal. And they go ballistic. And that also needs to be tempered. Most things can be managed, check into them, deal with them. We don't need the panic. And again, but to go back to the main message, despite pointing out those blind spots, the goal is go with your instincts. And when you're in doubt, check it out. You don't have to be a mental health professional. You don't have to be able to diagnose. The same way you go to your pediatrician, you don't know Whether the kid has strep or cold or COVID, you go and you check. You can do that with us mental health professionals. So now it's going to get even a little bit more just technical. I'm going to go through how to know that your child may need help. And that's basically symptoms. And this is not an exhaustive list, but it's a pretty robust list. I'm trying to give a broad framework, but nail down specifics. Now, again, these are for a wide array of issues. And the hope is that somewhere in there, it'll enter your head. And then if Chas v'Shalom this ever comes up, you'll remember, oh, that was a symptom. I heard about that. I know that that's something for me to look out for. Before I talk about that, just to remember, it's an easy acronym for the IDF: intensity, duration, and frequency. So any symptom by itself, you have to know how intense it is. So if it's self-harm, that's extremely intense. That itself will require immediate consults with professionals. Other things, let's say bad mood. A 2-day bad mood, not a big deal. A 4-week bad mood, duration, that's something you got to check into. And frequency, let's say temper tantrums or things like that. All kids have them. It's perfectly normal. All adults have them. How often? If they're happening all the time, that frequency tells us we got to look at it. So it's always looking through that IDF: intensity, duration, frequency. So now I'm going to go through, again, let's try not to do medical student syndrome where, oh my gosh, my kid has this, my kid has this. Just hear them through. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things. And we'll go through them just for you to have that filed away. So the general ones: emotional, behavioral, or personality extremes or fluctuations. Significant and ongoing changes from baseline functioning. So how my kid was doing this way, and now they're far from that. Anything that's far from a big change in the kid, that's a telltale sign. And that can be anxiousness, sadness, irritability, aggressiveness, restlessness, tiredness, lateness, avoidance. It can talk about any different thing. It's a big shift from baseline. Obviously, a kid who's constantly worried or anxious. A kid who has repetitive thoughts. They seem to get stuck on certain thoughts or memories or activities. They seem to have to repeat things. They seem fixated on things. Things are taking them longer. A kid has persistent nightmares. If they repeatedly refuse to go to school or take part in normal activities. If they have physical body somatic complaints or symptoms without no medical cause, headaches, stomach aches, nausea, dizzy, or vague aches and pains, and doctors don't have what to attribute it to, and it's coming up repeatedly, it's often a telltale sign that's more of a psychological emotional issue. Again, prolonged or very strong feelings of irritability or anger, or again, like we discussed, frequent temper tantrums. Persistent disobedience or aggression towards family, friends, or authority figures. Again, major behavioral changes. So the kid who is usually on time is now always late. The kid who had a lot of pep is very tired. If they were really not engaged, all of a sudden they're always engaged. They have to always raise their hand. They always have to do well. That can be a shift in that way. That's also a sign of unhealthiness. And obviously, poor school performance is something that can often be related to their emotional state. One of the number one factors, especially for kids, is how they're doing with peers. Do they have relationships? Do they feel safe and comfortable? Are they involved with peers? And if people are avoiding people or activities, whether that's family, friends, or social activities, it's another sign to look out for. Increased isolation in general, or strong desire to be alone, or be excessively secretive in what they're doing, what they're not doing. They're in the bathroom a very, very long time. They're hiding things. Those are things to look out for. And again, we want them participating in things that are normal and typical for their age. So if they're not, that's something to look out for. And we look at the distractibility, inattention, difficulty with concentration, organization category of things. And along with that can be hyperactivity or fidgeting. And some of the things that, obviously were touched in these earlier presentations here, but not eating or throwing up, using laxatives to lose weight, or binging are all important signs. Changes in dress, covering parts of the body used to expose, like their arms, those kinds of things. I assume you've got a lot on that topic. Again, ongoing lack of energy, even when rested. Kids who are not enjoying the things they used to enjoy. A sense of hopelessness, or if they feel like numb or nothing matters, just everything is blah, or they feel like they're floating. Obviously, if there's an overuse of drinking or drugs, those are problematic signs. Confused thinking, when they're thinking starts to not make so much sense or seems not like it used to be, that's a very acute sign that needs immediate attention. And globally, anything that impedes functioning or leads to neglecting one's health, personal care, or other interests, activities, or responsibilities. And kids, their job is school and friends, and so etc. If they're not doing those things, that's what we really need to look out for. And obviously, on the most severe end, there's suicidality. And unfortunately, our community is not immune to that either. And what's important to know is the vast majority of teens who end up killing themselves give some type of warning sign that they're feeling helpless and hopeless first. And if a teen makes comments about wanting to hurt themselves or kill themselves, you take it very seriously. Don't assume they're just saying things to get attention or because they're mad. That is something that needs immediate attention. So those are a broad, very comprehensive list of things to file away and things to see, okay, where is my child? And then and again, if you're unsure, just check it out. Now, in terms of helping, so as an aside, it's an interesting thing that the title is Stay in Control in an Ever-Changing World. And I find it almost humorous, as if we were in control and we're just trying not to lose that grip. And I believe if there's anything that COVID or the tragic events of last week taught us, is that we are not in control of very much. And the truth is that the approach is to really let go of our own delusions of control by letting go of the things we can't control, the future, and things like that. Then we can work more on ourselves and work with our children. It's when we try to control things that are really out of our control that we actually lose our grip on the few things that we're able to control. And the few things we're usually able to control is really myself, is really one of the only things. My reactions, my headspace, my mindset, how I relate is really some of the few things that I do have control over. And I think that's an important shift in focus, because when we're trying to control and make sure our kids are bubble wrapped and safe, we're just living in an illusion. The goal is to really totally accept the reality of our situation and all of the limitations, both inside of us, our struggles, our weakness, and outside of us. And the question then becomes, what can I do in this moment to make it the best moment I can? So living now, right? So we talk about like depression is living too much in the past, and anxiety is living too much in the future. And so much of our lives are just not, we're living not here. Live in the now and deal with what are the things that I can do to make these the best moments. So in terms of helping, probably one of the most important things, aside from really treating kids well, which is the most important thing, is talking to kids. And in general in the world, I think adults are somewhat word phobic, but I find particularly in the frum world, we're really phobic of words. And yes, Yiddishkeit emphasizes the power of words in ways I don't think any other system does, but not avoidance. And we have these fears that somehow discussing things will make them happen. And I think the greatest highlight is cancer. It's, you can die of almost anything in the Jewish world, heart attack, stroke, COVID, but you can't die of cancer. You die of yenamach. We have these fears. And then certainly when it comes to mental and emotional health, it's like just don't go there. And then if we talk specifically about sexuality or suicidality, self-harm, these things just become stuff that just goes totally radio silent. And we need to change that. And that's a delusion that if we don't discuss it, it doesn't exist, our kids won't struggle with it. And you ask, Menachem's and Hatzolah and asking the community, you spend a few minutes with him, you'll find out what's really going on. We can't keep things from our kids. They'll know on some level. Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson says about the Afikomen, he says one of the lessons is what we hide, our kids will find. And really highlighting that in our times, we need to be open up to closed off places. And a lot of the previous generations, that was a no-go, for better or worse. But our kids need us to really be much more open and explicit with them. And the truth is, even in the secular world, the majority of parents never talk about mental health with their children. And that accidentally can perpetuate the stigma, but we can't go there. It's not something spoken about. 82% of teens, these are secular teens, are calling on America to talk more openly and honestly about mental health issues in this country. And 46% of them reported that social media is their most common outlet for learning about coping mechanisms for mental health. They're not going to healthy adults in their lives. They're going to the internet. And they use, even 43% follow or support someone on social media who openly talks about mental health issues, because that's where they're getting it from. We're not doing the job. They will find others, and they're not necessarily the best resources we want them to have. So what do we really need to do is show our kids it's okay to acknowledge feelings. The only way to really do this, we can talk about our own. And pandemic exacerbated our issues. COVID-19, like we talked about, affected stillbirths, maternal mortality, depressions, anxieties across the board. If you have mental health issues, you can disclose it appropriately to your children. When we talk about our struggles, whether they're diagnosable or not, they meet the threshold or not, if we're taking medication, or sometimes even in terms of our showing bias, the kids are going to be living with it. The only question is whether they'll have someone they trust to help them understand what is happening. And that is crucial. You have to do that in a boundaried way. They don't have to know all the details, but they need to be able to cope with the vibes that they're getting, the feelings that are in the house, and they need to be able to see these are things we can talk about. Make sure, though, that they don't feel responsible for it or they have to be the therapist to their parent. Other critical elements is stay involved. Talk to your children like daily over dinner. Understand what's going on in their lives. What was your favorite part of the day? What was hard for you today? What would you like me to know about today? My family with younger kids, we do a bad, medium, good. So tell me something that you felt was bad, something that was medium, and something good. And this way, you just keep involvement and connection. And it shows that you want to know not just the good things, and you want to know something specific, not just that was fun. And remember, you really don't have to be an expert in mental health to have conversations with your teens. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. Be yourself and dive in and start these conversations. And I will talk to you about how to do that, because I want it to be very pragmatic. So for some parents, just setting the stage, the best time is to talk to your child when you're driving or walking together. So being distracted by the world around you and avoiding that eye contact sometimes makes it easier for both of you to have that conversation. For others, it's home, in your kid's bedroom. Whenever, wherever you do it, just be sure you have plenty of time and without interruptions. You don't have to also have the answers, nor should you do all the talking. Teenagers mostly need their parents to listen to their concerns openly without judgment. Be okay with silence. And remember, if a child does try to talk about this, which is not so common, it's hard to get them there. It's probably taking them a lot of work to work up that courage to speak to you. They're likely feeling very vulnerable and hyper aware of how you respond in those moments. And just keep it open-ended to avoid that fine or okay response. And then if you need to, ask about particulars without making an interrogation. And so I'm going to try to get here real practical and give you actual broad conversation starters and then more targeted ones to sort of get the ball rolling on that. So these are just examples, and don't try to write down a script. We never want you to be scripted. We want it to be as genuine as possible. These are just some ideas to have in your mind. What are you doing during recess? Who are you spending time with? Is anything worrying you? How's your body feeling? Are you having stomach or headaches? What causes you to have butterflies in your stomach? Especially for young kids, they don't have the language or can't connect that it's feeling. So talking about sensations in the body can be much more helpful. And for many of our teens and adults, that's true as well. Is it easy for you to fall asleep? Is something making you scared? Do you have any problems paying attention? Who are your friends now? What do you do with them? If you suspect any bullying, have you seen anyone being bullied? Does anyone bother you at school? Has anyone made you feel bad there? For other kinds of things, has anything really frightening happened to you? Have you been feeling cranky? Do you know what's bothering you? Do you feel sad? For kids who you're really concerned about, put it out there. Do you sometimes wish you weren't alive at all? Those are for kids you struggle with. Pointing out the observations, we're going to talk about this more, and getting the teen's input. Don't infer the teen's crazy or it's his fault. And don't give up asking if your first efforts are shut down. And when you find the time to talk, make an effort to listen. Don't just offer advice or solutions. Listen empathically. Try to understand it from their perspective. So here's some examples you're kind of not getting much from these initial prompts, things that are a little bit more pointed. And the safety of this is that you're talking about a specific behavior without any judgments. So I noticed your list of specific behavior, like spending more time alone. I notice you're sleeping more, or you're less or more teary or angry. I'm concerned and would love to find the time to talk about it. So you're not doing any judgment or anything. You're putting out there the data and you're trying to get them to talk about it. So you can just spell it out. I see you're spending more time in your room by yourself and you're not going out with your friends. I'm concerned about that. I notice you haven't been doing much homework lately. I'm wondering if you haven't been in the mood to deal with school. So you're giving them almost a sense that maybe it's the mood. You're giving them that opening. You're sleeping a lot more than usual. I wonder if it might be something bothering you, or if you're not feeling like your usual self. Some very broad question that can be very potent is, what's the hardest thing about being you at this moment? And that really gives kids an opportunity to open up. Sometimes they need us to open up first, and say, I felt depressed or anxious myself at times and noticed you might be experiencing some of the same symptoms. Would you like to talk to me or your general practitioner about how you're feeling, or a school counselor, or mashpia, or mechaneches, however it works? Know also that asking about thoughts of death, for example, it shows your kid that it's okay for them to share with you. Never talking about something doesn't make it not happen. It just means that it's something that's taboo. Same thing goes for sexual issues and other things like that. And I know you had Debbie Fox talk about that in terms of growth, and that's incredibly important. And it's incredibly important for the boys as well. And then even asking ourselves, how's my behavior changing because of my kids, and noticing my reaction so that I can go and have those conversations from a healthy, non-judgmental, accepting, not need to fix it place. And again, don't be surprised if your teen just insists nothing's wrong, or they become irritated by your suggestions. Many teens are very embarrassed, ashamed, afraid, or confused by what they're experiencing. And just again, try to keep the communication open, try to keep the door open, try to keep the relationship going. And sometimes you can even own the stuckness. You can say, I'm feeling stuck, I'm not sure how to help you. I've been reading up on good mental health and wonder if you've noticed yourself feeling blank feeling. What would it be like to talk to me or the school counselor about how you're feeling? So you're modeling for them the ability to talk about this. And you're showing them that it's not abnormal or weird or awkward. We're putting it out there. Many teens are much more comfortable talking to their friends, and peers are huge in terms of teens' importance. But they might lack the wisdom to deal with serious problems. So it's best if your teen also has older people they can count on as well. And you want to help them identify some people, especially because they might not want to talk to parents. It's very common that teens will open up with somebody else. And you want to help them pick 3 different people in different settings that they might be comfortable sharing with. But in terms of this conversation, there's some things to make sure you're sort of not to say. So sometimes we all feel that way sometimes. We're all sad or we're all anxious sometimes. It can be very tempting because you're trying to soothe the kid and make them feel what they're feeling is normal and nothing to worry about, but it can be very dismissive or invalidating, especially for a kid, especially if a kid is really struggling. You might need to really do something and get help to work through those issues. Or similarly, phrases like, okay, when you're older or in the future, don't really console a kid right now who's stuck in their current issues. And similarly, if we say, don't worry, you'll grow out of it. And for many mental illnesses, the truth is not the case. And if we let time go on and on and on without intervention, most of the time it gets worse. Even if it is the case that they will grow out of it, they're not going to feel particularly understood or comforted by that. Right now, I'm struggling, I'm in pain. And also kids tell us that when parents compare their experience to what they experience, I had that when I was younger. When I was young, you would have seen how difficult it is. That really invalidates children's struggles, and they really don't deal well with that. Similarly, if we say, you have nothing to be sad about, you have everything. So we might be coming from a good place. We might be trying to remind them of all the good and positive they have in their lives. But again, when I'm suffering, it doesn't help that people had it worse, or that other people, starving in Africa or down the block, they're in the hospital. Validate their pain. Similarly, if we go to the other extreme and say, that's not normal, that strikes at the other end of the spectrum, can really send the kid flying into panic. And one of the other things that we sometimes do is we tell kids not to tell or keep it secret. And that's very not healthy. We want to help kids, give them a language to share their truth and how to identify people who are healthy and safe to share it with. And again, to reiterate, resist the urge to just fix the problems. It's not your job to fix. That's why you have mental health professionals. It's a parent's job to love, support, encourage, be there so that they feel less broken, less alone. and that they feel loved and accepted. And kids reiterate all the time, they didn't want their parents ashamed of them. They want their parents to know, I'm doing the best I can. It's just gotten really hard for me. So some of the helpful things that you can relate to kids are just that empathic statement. That really sounds difficult. Can you tell me a bit more about what's going on? When did it start? Or how does the stuff that we just spoken about make you feel? Or just, I'm glad you were able to talk to me about this. And tell them you have a safety now. I'm in your corner. We got your back. And you're the other people who love you and care for you. Let them know mental struggles, emotional struggles are not their fault. They're diagnosable. They're treatable. Help is available. You can ask them, do you have any ideas what you'd like to do next? And if it's okay if you don't, let them know you're here for them and try to make a plan, even if it means just following up, do some research, speak to a doctor, just setting times to converse and be there. Just keep the conversation flowing. Don't shut it down and listen much more than you talk. And make sure you let them know you want to be there in whichever capacity you can. And let them know, again, if you can't talk to me, who are some other folks you'd be more comfortable talking to? And most importantly, don't be afraid to seek out professionals. And again, use them like pediatricians, something called a checkup from the neck up. I spend a great deal of time in such consults letting people know, do I think this is something that needs professional intervention or not? Does it need more attention, intervention? What kind of intervention? And that's very crucial. So you don't have to feel like, oh, now I'm signing my kid up for therapy or psychiatry. It can be a consult. It can be a consult without even the kid there, just to even check in on what you're seeing. And just so you know, there's a study that showed treatment delay, and again, this is the secular world. Delay from symptom onset is 6 to 8 years for mood disorders and 9 to 23 years for anxiety disorders. I can tell you every day in my practice, I take histories, and these symptoms, when you trace them to when they started, were years and years ago. And the problem is we adjust, it becomes our normal. And we sort of get, oh, that's how they are, when really they've been struggling. And in terms of just some resources, if you don't have your local mental health professionals, you don't know of them yourself, relief resources, that's all they do is mental health referrals. Amudim does a lot of crisis intervention, some referrals. And there are obviously many local clinics, both in the Crown Heights community and around. So reach out. So those are sort of the symptoms and those conversations. Now I wanted to make sure I covered that. And in some of the time remaining, I want to sort of pull out the lens and actually talk about some general things we can convey that are helpful. And this really goes to combating that toxic shame I was talking to you about beforehand. The most important thing is to accept and embrace the fullness of your humanity, your entire humanness. To realize Hashem made us with all the drives, feelings, that's anger, jealousy, lust, drives to murder. It's all in us. It's all part of it. I love the teaching in Tanya where you're not crazy, you're pregnant with twins. We have a totally dark side in us. And the goal is to embrace that that's part of us. It's there, and it's okay that we have those thoughts and feelings. It's okay to have the thoughts and to feel those feelings. We just don't want to identify as those negative thoughts and feelings. And that's, I think, what's critical for kids to know and for us to know. We are not our thoughts, our feelings, and we are not what has happened to us or how we were treated. The saddest thing is we're often our own biggest critics. Many of us have this internal chatterbox that's constantly spewing negativity, fear, criticism, guilt, toxic shame, hopelessness. And it just keeps going. It's reviewing the past, leading to the depression. It's going to the future, anxiety, and we rarely live consciously in this moment. That internal voice is our biggest enemy. It's otherwise known as the Yetzer Hara. That's its job. Keep you out of this moment, because this moment is the only place you can actually interact with God and others in truth. Keep you busy in the past or in the future. Keep it negative, and it can even look very religious. Yeah, you have to learn more, you have to daven more, you have to be a better chassid. But it really is landing me feeling not worthy enough, not acceptable. I can't be the simcha as I am, and that is toxic. That is where we get atzvus, yish, that toxic shame, that depression, that giving up, hopelessness, self-injury, suicidality. It's all outgrowth of that stuff. And we need to share our struggles, and including those of the giants, of Gedolim and Tzaddikim. I think one of the greatest lessons, particularly speaking to a Chabad audience, and accepting humanness, and for all those who are not Chabad, applies equally. To accept our humanness and decreasing the stigma of utilizing mental health resources is something that occurred with one of the Rebbes, the Rebbe Rashab. And this is in the Rishimas, the diary of the Rebbe. And the Rebbe had shared it publicly on a Shabbos talk, and I've heard Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson talk about it, and I've seen it in the Rishimas, in the diary. But it's shocking to me how many of the Chabad clients I work with don't know this famous story of really this Heilige Goin and Tzaddik, the Rebbe Rashab. And for those of you who don't know, the Rebbe Rashab was Reb Sholem Doid Ber Schneerson, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, known by the acronym Rashab. His son was the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz, and then whose son-in-law is the Rebbe. And what's incredible here is a story that took place with the Rebbe Rashab in the winter of 1902-1903 when he was 42 years old. And I'm going to, because it's a very sensitive topic, I'm going to read from the Lubavitcher Rebbe's Rishimas, his diary that was published, a verbatim and translate. He says, my father-in-law, the Rebbe at the time, the Rayatz, told me, the Rebbe Rashab, this great giant, struggled from a lowliness of spirit. And this is my own translation, you'll forgive me if it's not 100%. The Rayatz said, he didn't tell me that many details. To my mother, the Rebbetzin Shterna, his oinen rabbis, he complained a lot. After years of work, with everything, not even one of his midos, not even one of the character traits is as they should be. The ain kol haskala behir etzloi. He doesn't have clarity of thought. This is a man who's a goyim shebegoinen. And he can't focus his attention, he can't concentrate properly. The Rebbe Rayatz added to me, that was in that winter, I saw he was really deep in thought, etc. But he was detached completely from this world. And he quotes that he talks more about this in a different note. Even after Yud Tes Kislev, that they had there, that let everybody know the amazing milas of his status and what was going on then. Even after such a celebration, such a testimony, he was still struggling. In that winter, Nisanu Mipnei Zeh Levi. We traveled. The Rebbe Rashab asked his son, the Rayatz, to accompany him to Vienna, to ask the Eitzah of professional. He went to the famous known doctor, Freud, Sigmund Freud. So the Rebbe Rashab sought out and traveled a great distance to seek the advice and counsel of a mental health professional. And it was discussed, and we know this a little bit, that the Rebbe and Freud actually had very rich discussions, of which we don't really know many of the details. But at least thematically, we know that the Rebbe described to Freud a central concept in Hasidus of moyach shalat al alev, that the mind is supposed to rule over the heart. And that is embedded in Hasidus from the youngest ages. And Freud was a bit incredulous, like how he's trying to connect the mind and the heart. He said like a seed divides them. And this is not in the Rishima, I'll get back to the notes, but just to give a frame. And the Rebbe reportedly said something to the effect of, you have to be able to build a bridge or at least send telegrams. And the diagnosis that ended up having, that Freud diagnosed him with, is the Kopf begreift, was the Herz vertrocknet. The head grasps and comprehends what the heart cannot bear. When the Herz vertrocknet was the Kopf begreift, the heart can't bear what the head grasps. There's that distance, even in a goyin shebegoinen, a tzaddik, a rebbe, that struggle, the human struggle of How do I deal with my feelings? How do I get things to go accordingly? That human struggle was ever present. And it led to a lowliness of spirit. And he wasn't afraid to seek out the best help and to consult with a renowned physician. And what is crucial is to realize this can be by the greatest of minds and hearts. They're still exceptionally different, distant from one another. And building a bridge or sending those telegrams is extremely difficult. And if by such a person it is, we say, how much more so for those of us with much lower minds and hearts, that struggle, that human struggle. And we often get it backwards. We think the Rebbe Rashab was great despite this. That is the exact opposite. Greatness is because of it. Hashem didn't make malachim. He made humans with feelings, with all sorts of difficulties. And that challenge to struggle, to identify that internal adversary, and yet not identify with the negativity in my mind, and to overcome it, and to allow my seichel to manage those feelings, and to keep bringing light into the darkness, and to continue seeking out help, and to get that light out and implement the right strategies, and keep persevering. That's the pinnacle of human greatness. And it's unbelievable that the Rebbe, after struggling with this, what he went on to accomplish and influence, and the hashpah, and we look around the world, the hashpah that came out of these giants, it wasn't despite this. They let us know what it means to be human, to struggle, to persevere, to fall down, to feel negative, to feel down, and to find ways to get back up and give that over to others. Rav Hutner, from a very different camp, has an amazing letter. And he says, we often mistake also, we think we're most like the Gedolim when we're doing great, when we're perfect. I'm most like the Chavetz Chaim and I don't speak any Lashon Hara. He says, we got it backwards. It's not when everything's going well. It's when we're struggling. It's hard. We feel low. And yet we keep fighting and we fall and we make mistakes and we do aver and we're sinning and we're falling and we're lost. And yet we keep getting up and we keep trying. That's when we're closest to the Gedolim. So it's crucial that we help the kids know you're not your brain, your thoughts, or your emotions. You're an neshama. And as Chabad Hasidus emphasizes so greatly, your essence is pure and innately, infinitely valuable. And all this noise and all these feelings, they're there. They're not your essence. We can create a distance. We don't have to identify with that. We can identify with that deeper, true part of ourselves. But what's crucial to know is words fall short. And how kids get treated is much more important than in terms of what they'll experience in the world. Many have had powerful experiences that don't allow them to think or feel that way about themselves, and they might need professional help to live their best lives. We need to reduce the stigma, increase openness about emotions and struggles, interface this into our Hasidic teaching, show them how real life is affected daily in today's real life with the internet and with the struggles and with the self-harm and with everything that's going on. And it's incredibly important to know the Lubavitcher Rebbe has numerous letters about mental health, and he was sending people to the top specialists well before it was popular. And the Igros Kodesh, you can see them encouraging doctors for mental health, even when things could easily have been seen as Yiras Shamayim, like kleptomania. And you see side by side, Torah, Hasidus with the professionals. There was no steer. He was able to integrate. The only time I saw him oppose anything from a mental health professional, and it's such a lesson for us all, is when a patient reported that the doctor gave up hope on them. There's no hope for them getting better. That was the only time the Rebbe said that is not the doctor's decision to make, and that cannot be true. And he even checked that diagnosis can be treated. And he says, even if it can't right now, you hope for new treatments and siyata d'shmaya. That's the only place you had any issue with mental health professionals, is we don't give up. And we've never poskened that on a person. So in terms of parents, just to close with some of these things, studies show repeatedly that even one safe, stable, and nurturing relationship can be a major protective factor in the face of even traumatic events. And what we see for teens, what keeps them from tipping from state of healthiness into illness, many times is a connection to at least one good friend. So it's those relationships. It's that loy tov yosef levadai. It's the connection. It's the empathy. It's really sharing ourselves vulnerably and getting that empathy and support, not just some techniques or tools or how to live your life. Be with them in the struggle. Share with them. Let them know you're there, non-judgmentally and accepting. Let them know that they need to share with others, that none of us should deal with any of these things alone. We have a line in the psychology world that you're as sick as your secrets. We don't want people, children, families holding in their secrets. And what's extraordinarily predictive is the availability of adults to help kids cope with hardships. And if their parents are keeping it together. Parents, we often forget. Again, not from a guilt or shame-based perspective, from a positivity, a light perspective. You're the most important people in the children's lives. If this is true, that one person, a random stranger who just got to know your kid can have that effect for a kid who's traumatized, how much more so his own mother or father? There is nothing, nothing I could do, a professional, a mashpia, or anybody who can have as big a hashpah on a child as the love, the acceptance, the positivity, the commitment, the dedication that parents have. And so the most important thing, even if they're belligerent and they're pushing you away and it's exceptionally difficult and you feel lost, like the Rebbe said all the time, we don't give up. Don't give up on yourselves. Don't beat yourselves up. Fight the same negativity. We're going forward. Deal from a healthy place internally. Identify from your chelek elikami mamish and help connect to that part of your children. And if we really do that, and we all do that together, and we stop being factions and hiding, and we'll come together as a Klal Yisrael and do that, hopefully we will really merit to see the coming of Mashiach, Heikif in Yad Mamish. Thank you very much. And I'm open for questions if anybody would like.
Right. All right, so there's a couple of questions out here. I'm going to read them off to you. The first one, with all the struggles that you're talking about, there's so much stress on the parents and kids. Kids are acting out more chutzpah and more defiant. And of course, we understand they don't mean it. How do we deal with it when we are constantly facing the kids exploding? How do we respond without losing it? And at the same time, keeping in mind that there's so much a parent can handle.
So again, we have to be kind to ourselves. We have to start from a self-compassionate place. We have to know when we're stressed. We have to have our own people that we're connected with and our own supports. We like to stretch ourselves thin, and it doesn't work. So we need to do what we need to do. And sometimes we need professional supports. We need mashpiyim, we need mashpiyos, we need friends, we need family, we need as much as the kids do. In terms of the chutzpah and those issues, so that's what I was saying before, we have to let go of some of the control. A lot of times the kids today are not going to necessarily behave the same way that maybe kids even 20 years ago did. There's a cost benefit. When we're more open, we relate to them more on their level. That allows them to be more open. That also allows for more chutzpah. And sometimes that's a price we pay. We don't want to find a balance. A lot of times also, when we're busy focused on the chutzpah, we lose the message underneath. What's the kid really in pain about? What are they struggling about? We're so busy shutting down the chutzpah that we lose the message. And again, as the kid ramps it up, it's usually because something they're struggling and it's not being met. And we're often clashing about the chutzpah or the defiance, and we're not dealing with what's underneath. That's the tip of the iceberg, what's underneath it. So we got to try to, the hardest thing as a parent, is put our egos away. Okay? Very, very rarely are we, dealing with chutzpah because that's what a real kavod ha'adam or kvod shemayim is, because we're human and it hurts and we get frustrated. I joke with my kids, people pay to talk to me at home. Nobody wants to listen to me. It's very human. It's very frustrating. My kids years ago, when one of them was young, they used to chap, I guess, that people think you're smart about this. So he used to call me a stupologist. That was his insult to let you know, put you down where you belong. We need to try to calm ourselves down, not from an ego place. Stay calm and say, what does this kid really need? If I get out of what they're saying and how they're saying it, and I look what's under the surface. Menachem mentioned that 30 minutes from the yom yom a day, if I even pause 30 minutes, halavai, if I pause even for say, what's really going on? What might be there? And then I don't respond during this whole chutzpah exchange. I do when we're both calmly. I can try to use the conversation techniques we talked about to open up a different channel and deal with that. And yes, if you're reaching a place where you feel like you can't handle, again, ramp up your support, or that might mean your kid is really struggling and they need supports, and we need to wrap around care for everybody. Menachem, you reading further? How are we doing this?
We got the next question is, how do you prevent as well as deal with the indifference you spoke about? Kids simply don't care.
It's a difficult question. I'll be honest, I really struggle with this. I think something's really wrong in the transmission early. We're not giving over this sense that the life we have to offer, the Torah, the Hasidus, in a way that really attach them, that says, I want to live that way. Look at how the simcha mom and dad is. Look how the simcha the people around me are, right? Especially the kids who grow up from birth. It's so often I have to do more learning, more davening, more Hasidus, more. Versus when we're mekarev, kroivim, let's call it, go slow, steady, we're open, we're accepting, we're the aura, let's say, of Yiddishkeit, of Hasidus, that positivity, that joy is not being transmitted to them, because I think if it was, they would want more of it. We naturally are pleasure seeking. The neshama wants the ultimate toy, the ultimate pleasure. So we need to instill it from there. And then we also have to look at what's blocking them. For a lot of these kids, it's subconscious, I gave up. Like, I can't access that anyway. I can never be that. I can't measure up anyhow. So it's almost better to not care. Let me get out of it. But there is something going on where, like I said, even for me, I have not seen in the last couple of years of seeing this more than ever before, a certain lack of core. And we really need everybody, parents, mental health professionals, mechanchim, everybody to sort of really pick at this and try to figure out what is lacking there. I certainly, the longer I do this, I tell people, the less I know, the more humble I become. I don't have all the answers. And I think that's okay. It's important for us to be able to say, I don't know, and to keep looking and not to give up.
You spoke about social peers. Have you seen any real success in helping a child who has really bad social skills improve in a real way?
So definitely not my forte. I actually refer out kids with significant social skills deficits. It's not, but I believe there's a few things. First of all, the earlier you get these. So some of these kids are on the, what used to be called Asperger's and now is the ASD spectrum. Some of them are actually language deficits. A colleague of mine, Dr. Mandelman, constantly picking up missed language. And if you don't, so you can be good at, vocabulary and those things, but you missing the subtleties of how we communicate with each other and how social world is communicated back and forth, you can really become deficient. And that has a lot of success when they get, that kind of social pragmatic language help. There are certainly concrete things you can do to help them with the social skills, but also it's not all or nothing. It's not about having those kids with the really terrible social skills go hang out with the kids with these amazing social skills, letting them connect on any level, even with people more similar to them. And also, it doesn't, we want to choose quality over quantity. Having 1, 2, 3 good friends in the world makes all the difference. And so if we can help build bridges, and a lot of these kids need help, they need us to invite that kid over for Shabbos or a play date and help them along the way until they can get more comfortable with each other. So again, certainly, we never want to catch somebody and say it's unattainable. We want to get them whatever the various forms of help, and we want to build as many bridges. And again, we want it to not just be on the parents. So a lot of socialization happens in schools, in camps, shul groups, etc. Find every possible avenue to connect, to create some of those good connections.
Someone has asked if you can speak about depression in 8 and 9-year-olds.
Okay, so depression, particularly in young children, so sometimes you see it as sadness. A lot of times you can see it as irritability or agitation. And so that can be confusing because sometimes you see them as behaviorally challenging or just they become difficult, but they're really struggling. And again, that goes back to that, remember that mnemonic IDF, intensity, duration, frequency. We all get sad. 8, 9-year-olds can also be sad for many reasons. They're too tired, something's not going right at school, the teacher said the wrong thing to them, etc. You want to see that if a kid continues to be sad and it's a change from baseline, how they usually were, if that kid has become much more irritable consistently, that's the kind of thing I want you to do a checkup with your general practitioner or a mental health professional and really talk about the specifics of that. And again, a lot of that is trying to figure out what's going on in the environment, whether that's at home, yeshiva, camp, trying to figure out what is pulling this kid down, what is creating that negativity, where are they not feeling successful, how can we build that up? And again, as much wraparound, the data is extremely clear that any one thing doesn't do the trick, but if you get all the parties involved and all the stakeholders and they start making those changes, especially if you catch it at 8, 9 years old, you can really have a dramatically different trajectory for a kid like that.
What tips can you give a parent whose child is extremely self-conscious?
So first of all, we use self-conscious as a sort of a euphemism. That often means that they really struggle with that pathological shame. I was talking, they really feel unworthy. They don't feel good enough. They don't feel like they can measure up to the people around them. And often a kid who's extremely self-conscious really should get professional help. So I'll start with that. Everything I said about, first of all, the parents giving over the message, you are beloved as you are. I'm happy with you as you are. I accept you as you are. I appreciate you as you are. And finding ways to convey that is important. Also, everything I talked about of learning that the internal voice that says you're not good enough, he's better than you, she's better than you, what are they going to think? That's the enemy. That's the Hatzolah. It's inside, it's in your head, but it's not who you are. And we start to create distance between the negative voices and the negative feelings and the identification of who we are. And even at the lowest level, we can teach kids sort of a little bit mindfulness, a little meditation to create some distance and watch those thoughts and feelings come up without getting stuck in them. It's a big difference when you feel I'm the enemy, something's wrong with me. Shame says I am a mistake versus no, this is our challenge that God put in us, this negative speech center that constantly says you're a mistake. That's the Hatzolah job, for you to believe that. That's a bully in your brain is another way to talk about it, or it's like a microchip implanted. However you want to frame it, to create distance between the identification of the self and these voices, and to help them learn to let them flow. Some kids will need to combat them with rationality. Some kids will need just ways of distracting from that. There are a lot of different things, but the central theme is not identifying with those thoughts and feelings, to detach from them as being me, and to start to demonstrate control for myself, that I could hear them, I could listen to them, I could see them, so they're not me. Oh, I know this trick already. I know how this bully talks. I know how this Hatzolah communicates. I know all his tricks. And the more he sees it that way, he has almost an enemy that he's fighting with light, that goes. But those kids really, really need a lot of professional help. And then that person can help target the interventions to your kid's specific issue.
We've got a couple more here. For a parent who struggles with anxiety, can that impact their child to a point where the child begins to feel anxious about things they never felt anxious about because of the way they see the parents react?
We speak the truth. And so absolutely. Many times parents will say, oh, I never said anything to them, or I hide it from them. And that's what I said before, why Jacob says, what we hide our kids find. It's not that they find out specifically, mommy suffers from an anxiety disorder, daddy suffers from an anxiety disorder, but they feel it. The whole atmosphere in the house is dramatically different when a parent's calm, relaxed, chilled, or a parent's uptight, intense, even if they don't say something clear to the kid. And yes, both in terms of genetics as well as the environment that you're giving them gives that over. again, not go home and beat yourself up now that you're anxious. Now you should also feel badly, but know that that's your challenge. Know that that's your struggle. Do what you can. Again, if your child that age, and how you can communicate that, and not, to let them know that mommy struggles or daddy struggles, and how they can cope with that. To say sometimes with them that, oh, mommy got anxious, daddy got anxious. That's really okay. To sometimes go the other way and make sure you're really letting things that you might not otherwise go almost to the Rambam, go to the other extreme and try to create a really chilled environment. And if you see it really impacting them already early, let somebody, again, professional, start to help them. Or sometimes in a case like that, it's better that the parent go for the professional help so that they calm down. And especially if it's a younger kid, I'll often rather the parent be in treatment than the child, because I can get much further with them and that impacts their whole family. And then I've seen that so many times where parents will say, wow, I didn't even know we could get to such a complex. I didn't know we could have this sort of environment in our house. And that really can pick up life for the kid in a whole different way.
Right. Okay. So here's another one, and I'm going to add to it. What is the best way to deal with a child that's clearly anxious, but based on your presentation, the child does not necessarily fit a candidate for therapy? What would be the best way to parent them at home? That's the question that's been posed. And my question to you, which comes up all the time, parents want their children to go to therapy, but the child refuses. How do they encourage and get it to work?
It's an excellent question. Again, a lot of times the questions are better than the answers. So first of all, a lot of times one of the resistances to therapy is because we frame it as, okay, you got real problem, now you need a therapist. And I tell parents and Menachem on the phone all the time, it's got to be for them, by them. To whatever level they're coming, because they realize something for them on their own will, increases success. Also, many of us think, oh, therapy is for the nevachs, the guys who couldn't make it. And I want them to know, I have the coolest kid in your class, in my practice. I have literally Rosh Yeshivas. I have real estate and healthcare moguls. I have some of the highest functioning people Klal Yisrael has in my practice. Why are they there? Each of them has a struggle. Each of them wants to live life better. So if we make therapy more of like a personal trainer at the gym, it will become much less stigmatized and many more kids would be more open to it. But if a kid, bottom line, isn't going to go in, that happens many times, get the parents getting educated about how to deal with that condition. So in this case, it's anxiety. There are a lot of excellent children's books I have parents read with their kids. I have parents learn about the anxiousness. We can sort of train parents to almost become para therapists in the sense that we give them the tools and the concepts to bring home. So there's a lot you can do without the kid coming in, as long as you're really open and willing to do that. And parenting them at home is, again, one of the crucial things with anxiety. This is really a talk into itself, is the natural instinct as a parent is always to reassure the child. It's going to be okay. No, there's no burglars. No, it's not happening to us. And that's fine for kids who are dealing with regular struggles. The problem is once you're really in an anxiety disorder camp, the brain is always, but what if, but what if, but what if? And the reassurance lasts, it's like a bandit. It lasts very short term, and then it's back. And the treatment globally, sort of don't try this at home without guidance, but I'll just give you the global framework, is something we call exposure response prevention. Is actually facing fears. So to have a kid, maybe a burglar might come. How do you do that? You have to know what you're doing to do this. You should not do this on your own without guidance. But I just want to give you a concept of how it goes against the natural instincts and why parents can often just keep the cycle going. So I get a security with a kid who trusts me, and then I can tell them, is it possible a burglar will come in? Let's say, take that example. Can I ever guarantee with absolute certainty that a burglar won't come in? No. If Hashem wants a burglar to come in, will he come? Yes. I give them, do we live in a basically safe neighborhood and we take whatever precaution we check, we lock our locks? Yes. So I'm going to live normally, and I accept the possibility bad outcome happens. So I try to structure anxiety treatment to 3 steps. Accept the possibility of a bad outcome happening. Don't avoid the fear or neutralize it by reassurances or other things. And then ask yourself or for this case, your kid, train them. What would I do this moment? What would I want to do this moment if I was not anxious? And go do that and redirect your attention back into that here and now, what you would want to do if you weren't anxious. So instead of going to check the lock, most kids don't want to recheck the locks or whatever other fear they have if they weren't anxious. They would want to play, they would want to read, they would want to run. That's a structure, but that's very dangerous for a parent to implement because it could feel like, oh, wow, you're not reassuring me, you're not a comfort anymore, you're pushing me away. So that's why it needs guidance of a mental health professional, how to implement that. But I just want to show you what happens naturally as a parent that goes against our parenting instincts. So we have to learn how to do that.
And then now the question is, or the comment is, can you name some of those books?
Yeah. What to Do When You Worry Too Much is one for general anxiety. The same author has What to Do When Your Brain Gets Stuck is excellent. There's one I just bought that's really awesome. I'm gonna look it up myself here. It's something about there's a bully in my brain, but let me get the exact, look up my own little Amazon history here. Oh, here it is. Brain Bullies, Standing Up to Anxiety and Worry by Brett Novick. It's a really cute, but really good book on that. So those are a couple, particularly for anxiety.
Okay, that's it for now for the questions. There's one more just came up. What does it mean when parents spoil their children? Is it about giving into everything or buying them tons of stuff?
So it's interesting. My mentor, his words are now reverberating in my mind. He used to say many years ago that a spoiled child is a child who got too much of what they did not need and not enough of what they do. Meaning, we're often, instead of giving our time, our focused attention, our acceptance, our love, we give them stuff. And then they become dependent on getting that stuff and the retail therapy and the new item in order to manage their emotions. And that is what sort of the spoiled child is. You don't spoil a child by giving them too much love, too much empathy, too much understanding, too much acceptance. You cannot spoil a kid that way. There is no such thing. It is only through replacing those things with stuff. And today, unfortunately, and I'm as guilty as anybody else, we often give them this, where it's not us, it's we're busy, we're distracted, it's half our attention. And yeah, it's much easier to just buy something on Amazon for them than to really connect deeply with them. And so that's what I think the root of spoiling is.
You have time for one more?
I'm hanging out.
What would you guide from the mental health perspective to parents of a child who doesn't daven at all, as well as the young child that has no warmth for Yiddishkeit?
Okay, so it sounds like the one who is not davening is older, and this is, again, it's hard to know when this level is reached, but the general rule of thumb with this is stop being their mashgiach, stop even being mechanech them. Almost treat it like you're their friend. Be mekar them with shtei yadayim. Get them what they like. Show them, basically. Let's use a Hasidic model. Try to be as close as we could be to Rav Levi Yitzchak Barditcher. Celebrate them. Celebrate whatever they have. Celebrate Yiddishkeit. What do you want? How can I get it for you? Be there for them. It's because the way we develop our frame of Hashem is through people. That's all the Mashalim in the Rambam, and when we say Avinu, right? It's all how we relate to the important authority figures in our lives, primarily our parents, our Abayim, our Moros, etc. And if those people were critical, were demanding, I felt like I couldn't reach the level that they wanted me to reach. I just don't feel I live up. I don't see that they really like me, that they have joy in being together with me. I'm going to view God the same way. I say that the heavens are the largest projection screen. We'll put all that we feel inside straight on there. And then what will be reflected back to me is Hashem's also. He's not happy with me. It's never enough. So who wants to daven? Who could even raise their head to daven to that? I think a line I heard not long ago, which is really powerful, is that we have to move away, that Judaism is not a religion, it's a relationship. So we want to relate to them and build that kesher and make them feel warm, accepting, and for them to see, wow, this is what Torah does to people. This is how they treat. I want more of that. And I want to get to the source of that. That's to the Eibishter. If you focus on you have to daven this, do this, I'll pay you $50 to daven, it's usually short-sighted. To whatever level you can create positivity around that. And quite frankly, one of the tragedies of our chinuch situation, the kids have no clue what davening is. Half the time they don't know the words. They just it's just some ritual that they do. And so once a kid crosses the threshold of the social norm of, okay, I don't daven anymore, has no meaning. So if anything, we really need to step up tremendously. What is davening? What does it mean to relate to Hashem? What does it mean to talk in a very real way? And for the younger kids, sorry, I lost part of the question here. The young child has no warmth to Yiddishkeit. It's the same message. That warmth, they're not picking it up in the environments, and it's a tragedy. So many times we get so focused on the curriculum, on the sheet, on finishing this, on finishing that, and we lost the varmkeit, we lost the warmth. And it's so profound for me because that was what Hasidus was all about, was bringing that fire back in. And it goes back to the comments I made about those from birth. We so often we lose that. And we're just so busy with do this, follow the routine, finish the system, that we've lost what we intended to do and to create that zest and that fire and that geschmack and that. But it's really transmitted. If they see their parents reach out to Hashem, they see that their parents cope with tragedy through a place of emunah, that they see a varmkeit, that there's a warmth, there's a singing, there's a love, there's a beauty, they're going to go towards it. We're very simple. We're programmed. If something makes me feel small, less than, inadequate, like I can't do enough, why would anyone want part of that? So many will try because it looks so important, and they give up. And some kids will just be like, no shaykhs. It is very hard in the current world to create that varmkeit. We have tremendous competition. These videos, these games, these social media are enormous distractors. Look at how many of us as adults are constantly struggling with it. So we really need to step up our whole relationship in terms of Yiddishkeit and what we're conveying to these children. And so much of it requires a pivot from hitting all these benchmarks and what's that issue and where's my kid doing and who's bigger and who's going to be better on the shidduch market, to this the real what's going on inside you and what's your kesher. Moshe Feinstein, Hatzolah, just reminding me, he makes it almost sound simple as a joke. I don't know anybody who's able to do this, but he said every positive thing a kid gets, an ice cream, a bicycle, the Eibishter giving you, he wants you to have. If you parent like that, so mamela, then the other things that are a little bit more difficult, they want to do as well. So obviously, like I said, I don't know anybody who's done that, but to whatever level, we can give them a sense that the good things in their lives are coming through the Eibishter. That's how it works. Sorry, I'm seeing a...
So, Dr. Zimmerman, I want to thank you for presenting tonight, a beautiful presentation. And Menachem Freeman, it's late. We really appreciate you giving your time. And whoever wants to watch the presentation, if you join later on, it will be on YouTube. Unfortunately, we got a little late start on YouTube, but I will post later this week the full, we missed the first 10 minutes on YouTube, but we'll be able to, you could watch this, what's on now, and I'll post the full one, later this week. But again, thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Menachem. We appreciate you taking the time and presenting.
Thank you. Pleasure and a privilege.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.